All right, so today, during Nurses Week and Hospital Week, we are privileged to have Dave Sanderson. He is a individual, someone who was an ordinary person in an extraordinary situation. He was a top sales producer in every company he worked for, and on January 15, 2009, was on a business trip he had made hundreds of times before. Like all of us, when you travel, especially on business, things are often routine and we take things for granted. Then, out of the blue, something happens that changes what was once routine on a day that changes your life. When a bird strike hit U.S. Airways Flight 1549, there was no choice for the crew but to ditch the plane into the Hudson River. Sitting on the plane in what many would consider to be the wrong place at the wrong time, he knew he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Thinking only of helping others in this crisis, our speaker became the last person off the back of the plane that day and was largely responsible for making sure so many others made it out to safety. Exposed to frigid water and freezing temperatures, doctors feared that he would suffer a heart attack or stroke from the dangerous conditions. Miraculously, he returned to his job that following week and has since become the face of everyday American hero. When confronting potential tragedy, he remembered the words of his mother, "If you can't do it, you must do it." And he summoned the inner strength to persevere when his own life was put in jeopardy. In what has become known as the Miracle on the Hudson, he shares the lessons of that day with audiences around the world and shows you how leadership, resourcefulness, and managing your mind in a crisis, anyone can step up and overcome their own personal plane crash.
Tonight, Miracle on the Hudson, a jetliner filled with passengers crashes in the frigid waters off Manhattan, and everyone on board survives.
U.S. Airways Flight 1549 had just taken off from LaGuardia Airport in Queens for Charlotte, North Carolina, when it apparently hit a flock of birds, knocking out both of the plane's engines.
Cactus 1539 in first.
Cactus 1529, turn right 280, you can land runway 10.
We can't do it. We're going to be that one.
Even without power, though, the pilots managed to maneuver the Airbus A320 northward over the Bronx, make a sharp turn south, then follow the Hudson River alongside Manhattan Island, losing altitude along the way, and finally coming to rest on the river.
The plane then skimmed across the water 100 yards or more before coming to a rest just off Midtown Manhattan.
Many passengers didn't think they'd make it. One man turned his cell phone on so his body could be found through the phone's GPS. A woman left a message for her husband. "Tell the kids I love them." Joining me now is David Sanderson. He was one of the last passengers out of the plane. I understand you were actually in the plane after it landed for 7 minutes. Was it filling up with water?
Yeah, once we got everybody out, I stood in the plane to make sure everybody was out. And it was filling up pretty rapidly, and it got up to about waist level. And then when everybody was out in the lifeboats, I then stepped out on the edge there, and it was about knee deep at that point. And I just jumped in and started trying to swim to the first boat I could find.
Chesley B. Sullenberger III, a former fighter pilot, used 40 years of experience to somehow land the powerless plane on the icy waters of the Hudson River, a feat that's being called a miracle.
Dave, take me inside the plane. Take me inside as this plane impacts on the water. What was going on inside?
It was stone quiet in there, which was amazing to me, because I don't think anybody cross-referenced what was going on. And I think that was a saving grace. And I just want to say, I admire your skills, but I honor the way you managed your state. And now I do listen to the flight attendants every flight. I know exactly where everything is. I know exactly where the exits are. And I know where that life preserver is.
I'm really proud of a dear, dear friend of mine by the name of Dave Sanderson. Every one of us got a hero inside. Every one of us has a capacity in the most difficult times to find our strength. And it's nice to see a miracle on the Hudson and know that part of that miracle was an extraordinary pilot, and another part of that was a dear friend who, even when he could barely function, made sure other people's lives were being saved and supported.
I'd like to introduce to you, and please welcome Dave Sanderson.
I'm really impressed. Thank you for coming in. I know you're quite busy today. And first, let me thank Libby Ann for inviting me here. I've met Libby Ann a few years ago when I was speaking for the Red Cross here in Columbia, trying to raise some money. So she and I became close friends, and I appreciate her remembering me. And well, thanks Stephanie for inviting me here on Nurses Week. I travel the world now, and I speak at a lot of hospitals, and I love speaking to nurses. A lot of times I get to the administrators, and they're pretty boring. So I love talking to nurses, so thank you very much for having me today. Thank you. As you know, on January 15th, back in 2009, another tragedy could have happened up in New York City. Instead, a miracle did occur that 155 people on US Airways Flight 1549I, so one of those that day that were blessed. Over the next 45 minutes, I want to share with you that experience. Some of the things I was thinking, and 5 things I think really contribute to that outcome, whether it was teamwork or leadership, resourcefulness, or how to manage your mind through a crisis, or the power of faith, and how certainty and courage created a miraculous outcome out of a very chaotic, potentially tragic situation. But there is one thing I'd like you to think about as I speak. The time that plane took off from LaGuardia, the time it crashed into the Hudson River, the time I got to the hospital was only about 30 minutes. And I wasn't scheduled to be on this flight. Scheduled to be on the 5 o'clock flight that night. That day I was working in a distribution center in Brooklyn, New York in my job as a sales manager. Now, I don't know if you've ever been or even worked inside a distribution center, but they normally open up quite early in the morning. This one opened up at 2 o'clock in the morning. So our day started about 5 and we got done about 10. Now I travel over 100,000 miles a year of what I do in my job, so any chance to get home to my wife and 4 kids in Charlotte a little bit early, I should try to take advantage of that. So about 10 o'clock that morning I called the travel agent and worked with her, and she put me on Flight 1549. So I truly believe I was supposed to be on that plane for a reason. There's nothing extraordinary about the day. It was 11 degrees and snowing. I was one of the first set of passengers to board the plane that day because of my status with US Airways. I was a chairman. I was top tier. So I went back to my seat on seat 15A. That's 4 rows behind that left wing. And I did exactly what I did every single time I got on the plane then. And I hallucinate what you probably do when you get on a plane now. Went back to my seat, put the briefcase down, put the wall in the briefcase. I pulled the magazine out and I started to read. I did not listen to the flight crew. I did not know where the exits were. I did not read that little brochure they always tell you to read. I guarantee you every single time I get on a plane now, I do. Because I know now how important it is to be aware on a plane. It was a little over 60 seconds after we took off, so I heard the explosion. And it was a loud explosion. Man, I've never heard anything on a plane like that before, so it got my attention. So I looked up, I looked out the window, and I saw fire coming out underneath the left wing. So I knew something had happened, but you know, I fly so often, I thought the plane lost an engine. No big deal, I thought the plane lost an engine. But see, that's where I think God's grace entered for the first moment on this plane, because no one knew at that moment in time what happened on the left side of the plane also happened on the right side of the plane. And I truly believe anyone would have cross-referenced or checked in, what'd you see, what'd you hear? There could have been a lot of panic. People start to panic, people start to lose their heads. And when people start to lose their heads, they start making irrational decisions. But this day, 7 years later, the one thing that stays with me, I bet if you talk to any passenger on that plane, they'll tell you the same thing. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The guy next to me elbowed me and said, "Hey man, what's going on?" So I think he's going back to LaGuardia. I felt him banking. I saw he was going back to the airport. But how fortunate we have a captain who not only had over 40 years of experience and 20,000 hours of flight time, was also a fighter jet pilot during Vietnam, and as important, if not more important, a first officer who also had over 20,000 hours of flight time. The captain was a certified glider expert. How to employ that skill called gliding, I want to say me and 154 other souls, but possibly the George Washington Bridge in New York. As soon as he cleared the bridge, he said the only words he said the entire time on this plane. He said, "This is your captain, brace for impact." Like I mentioned, I didn't pay attention to instruction. I didn't know what that meant. I know it's serious. Give you a heads up, you hear that on a plane, something's going down, and it's going down pretty fast. See, I think that was the moment though. That was the moment that everything that I learned, everything that I trained for, came into play. Because for the 10 years prior to that day, I was the head of security for a gentleman named Tony Robbins. You ever heard of Tony Robbins, the guy in the video? Not only did I get an opportunity to not only travel with him, but I also learned and absorbed everything that he taught, so now I get the opportunity to go all over the world and share these lessons and strategies from that day with people. And my goal for you today is this. that you might hear one or two things I want to share with you today, so the next time you face what I call your own personal plane crash, whether that's a health incident or a fire or a flood or something like that, that you too might remember some of the things that I and other people did that day to survive and to hopefully thrive afterwards. And after we crossed over the bridge, I did two things. First thing I did is I prayed. I prayed, whoever that captain is, man, just get me down to one piece. So I don't want to come back in multiple body parts. I at least want to come back in one unit. Second thing I prayed for is the last person I spoke with, who was my client up in Brooklyn, to call my wife to tell her I loved her. The third thing is I prayed to God to forgive my sins. I don't want anything between me and God at this point. We're going down, and I want to go up, and it's not looking good right now for me. And the second thing I did is I reached down in my briefcase, got my wallet out, and shoved it down in my pants. Because if something did happen, which looked like it was probably going to happen, at least they could claim my body. I wanted my kids to know who I was. And then I put my head down, because I didn't know how to brace. I just put my head down. It was about 60 seconds after he cleared the bridge when he crashed into the river. And it was a hard hit. He estimates he hit between 100 and 120 miles an hour. That's how hard a hit this was. So when he hit, I went all the way back in the seat, all the way up my seat, just like that. It was that hard of a hit. But when I came back up, I opened my eyes and I looked out the window and I saw light coming through the window. So I knew I had a shot, but I wasn't out. Because if you saw when the plane landed, the entire bottom of the plane was stripped off. If somebody actually did listen to the flight crew, went to that closest exit, which may be behind you, drove up that door. So now you have water coming in from underneath the plane, water coming in from the back of the plane. So depending on where you were on that plane, I was towards the back of the plane, water immediately was going from ankle, knee to waist deep, just like that. Now the question I get all the time, I got it last week, I did an interview in Sydney, Australia on Skype. I got this question. How do these people get on these wings so fast? I get it all the time. And the answer to the question is this. And when we hit, like I mentioned, when I went back, the top of the seats broke back. When the top of the seats broke back, people got extremely resourceful. I always say this to all people, jumping up on top of the seats, walking down the seats to get out the doors. That's how most people got out. Now 4 years ago, I had the privilege of speaking in Providence, Rhode Island, to a group of bishops and priests, a very unique audience, one of the most unique I've ever spoken to. And when I got done speaking, one of the bishops came up to me, and he looked at me and said, "Son, I think those seats broke because of divine grace." I looked at him and said, "Sir, I don't know. I don't know." A few months later, I spoke in Groton, Connecticut for a group of nuclear engineers where they make the nuclear subs for the Navy. Very cool place, very different audience. I get done speaking. One of the engineers came up and said, "Dave, I think those seats broke over there designed to break that way." I don't know. I have no clue. So what do you do when you don't have an answer to something? We call the wizard behind the green curtain, right? She has all the answers. So I knew who that person was at U.S. Airways. I called her up and said, "Listen, I'm getting this question all over the country. Can you tell me, how did the seats break?" She said, "We don't have a clue. We don't know." That's how most people got out. But I didn't do that. Man, I didn't even think to get on top of the seat. My thought process was get to the aisle, get up and get out. It's the first thing I said, aisle, up, out. When I got to the aisle, something happened that only changed that day for me. Probably changed the entire direction of where my life was going to go. My mom kicked into my head. My mom passed away in 1997. There was something she would tell me when I was a child that just popped in my head at that moment, and it was, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you. And to me, the right thing is take care of other people first. See, I grew up in an environment playing sports, athletics, Boy Scouts, all this stuff. You're always around guys. You're always doing your team stuff, right? So that's why I waited in the back of the plane to make sure we got everybody out. And once we got everybody out, I started making my way up the aisle. Now you got to remember, now we're a couple minutes into this thing now. I'm waist deep in the water. Not only did the top of the seats break back, but the bins broke open. So you've had luggage just flown out. It's dark in the back of the plane. You couldn't see what you're doing. So every time you took a step, you ran into something. And at that point, you couldn't see what you were hitting. Was it somebody's body? Was it luggage? You didn't know what it was. You know, next slide, please. But all the further I could get up was 10F. And the first picture on Good Morning America was me, the bald-headed guy, trying to get out of the plane. When I got to the door, though, it was an amazing sight. There was no room on the wing for me. There was no room on the boat for me, but it was an amazing sight. People already being rescued. I don't know who said this, and I'll give them 100% of the credit. I think they got it right when they said Skiles and Sullenberger got everybody down that day, and the crew and passengers got everybody out. But the real heroes of the day were the first responders. And the first of the first responders was the New York waterways, the ferries. They were there about 2 minutes after this plane crashed. Now there's a lot of ways to define a miracle. But having someone there to rescue you after a plane crash, in ice cold water, in just a couple minutes, that's the start of a miracle. And if you look at this picture really closely, you'll notice I'm holding on to the lifeboat. And the reason why is this. I don't know anybody here knows anything about the Hudson River. I've learned a lot about it over the last couple years. It's got a very fast current. This plane actually floated down the river about a half a mile in 24 minutes. Just floating down the river. So this little lifeboat was going in and out from the plane, and like me, they didn't read instructions. Who reads the brochure? It's actually tethered to the plane, but no one knew that. So as they were floating down the river, they kept screaming, "Hold on, hold on." That's why I held on to the little lifeboat as close as I could to that wing for 7 minutes, waist deep in 36-degree water. All of a sudden, I sort of looked around, looked out the wing, and all of a sudden something caught my eye. There was a lady, she was holding on to a baby. In fact, I found out later she actually had 2 kids on this plane. She had a 3-year-old on that lifeboat, and a 3-month-old she was holding on to. And she wasn't moving. She was stifled. Now, all the training that I've had in my life is you ever get in this team situation where someone just locked, they can't do anything, they go in that trance, you got to do something radical to get them out of it. You got to do something really radical. So I yelled at her. I yelled, "Throw the baby! Throw the baby!" And Kayla, I didn't think she was going to throw a baby. I think that was an option she was probably going to employ. What happened was I got her attention. She sort of looked at me and she's like, "What?" It's amazing though where God puts people. If you look at this picture really close, there's a blonde-haired lady with her head turned to the right. She just happens to be a mother of 3 from Knoxville, Tennessee. She heard me yell at this lady, and all of a sudden she looks at the lady and says, "Give me the baby, give me the baby." So all of a sudden that lady gives her the baby, jumps on the lifeboat, and all of a sudden you see people walking down a wing, get off the plane. About 4 years ago, that lady who lives in Manhattan sent me this package. When I first got it, there was 2 things in this package. There was a note that said, "Thank you for saving my family." The second was a picture of the captain with that baby that we all worked together to save that day as a thank you. Sort of a remembrance of what we all did that day. Now, I don't think I did anything that spectacular like I'm going to throw the baby. I don't think that was one of my finer moments. I think if you see my mother in heaven, she'll probably tell you the same thing. One of the stupidest things I ever said, right? I don't think the lady from Knoxville did anything that spectacular. I think the lady who gave up her baby, something pretty special. Just think how much faith. Think about a definition of faith. To give your baby up to some guy who's yelling at you, some lady you don't even know, and you give your baby up. Man, that takes a lot of faith. But I'm still on the plane. Things are happening all over the place. And anybody here from New York or New Jersey? Anybody? They get a bad rap. Because there's one thing about people in New York and New Jersey, they do one thing really, really well, is respond. Unfortunately, they've had to respond to things before, so they don't sit around and wait for someone to say, "Now you go here, now you go do this." They just go, and they start figuring things out. And one of those guys happened to be a tugboat captain. I had a chance to talk to him a couple years ago and hear his story. I love hearing stories. And it's pretty cool. He said he heard an all call go out, all boats go. He brought his tugboat out, and he had a plan. He said his plan was he's going to bring his tugboat as close as he could to that wing, throw a rope to the lifeboat, attach it, pull the lifeboat to his tugboat, and help clean up the situation, which was a great plan. What he wasn't planning on is people standing on a wing, and he couldn't get the boat across the wing. So he got beeped out. See where the boats are coming in from the front of the plane? He got beeped out. So he had to get out for the next boat to come in. So as he was backing his tugboat out, he hit the front of the plane. Now that's not that big of a deal, unless you're on the plane. And I was on the plane. Has anyone ever seen a tugboat? They're big, heavy boats. It shook the plane. And all of a sudden I felt water like sloshing up my back. That's the moment like I remember yesterday. I mean, it was like I could see it like it was yesterday. Titanic. You remember that movie when the boat tips up, it sucks everything down with it? And my thought was, man, do not be sucked down in a plane. You're this close to getting out of here. Do not be sucked down in a plane. So I always stop here and think my mom and my dad. If they didn't give me swimming lessons when I was a child, I may never be able to get off this plane. And that's one of the biggest lessons from that day. See, I have the privilege now of going to colleges and universities. I talk to a lot of colleges and universities. You know, and I get to this point, I stopped at this point for these kids. Because I don't know if you have kids, I got 4 of them. And if you ever tell your kids to do something and all of a sudden look at you like you're an idiot, like, what? What do you ask me to do? And I tell these kids to think of this one moment in time, this one moment. If Captain Sullenberger, when he attended the Air Force Academy, does not learn how to glide a plane, me, 154 of the souls, and possibly the George Washington Bridge are not here today. Guys, Somebody else is talking to you. I'm not here. If my mom and dad don't make me learn how to swim, I am not here today. Because one of the biggest lessons of that day is this. All these things you learn and train for 30, 40, 50 years ago, one day you may have to use that skill to save yourself or save somebody else. The skill Sullenberger had to use was gliding. He learned that back at the Air Force Academy back in '68. The skill I had to learn was swimming. So as soon as I felt the water go up, I'm like, I'm out of here. I jumped in to swim to the closest boat that I could find. Happened to be at the end of that wing. Now, I don't know if anyone's ever been on the ferries of New York. They either have the metal ladders like that, or the older ferries have orange plastic ladders that roll down from the side. See, they don't have elevators to take you out of the water. They don't get paid to rescue people. They get paid to take people back and forth from Jersey to New York. That's how they get paid. Well, mine had an orange plastic ladder. So when I got there, I got my backside, and all of a sudden yelling, climb, climb, climb. I yelled, can't. And all of a sudden, my mom started talking to me again. Because the word my mom hated most in life was the word can't. See, if you grew up in our household, if you said, I can't to my mom, she said, if you can't do it, you must do it. She made you do what you said you couldn't do. That was my mom. So I got one arm up, and I felt somebody grab it. Got the other arm up, I felt somebody grab it. To this day, I do not know who these two gentlemen are. But they pulled me on one of those ferries. And I'm not a small guy. You got me, I've been in the water for 7 or 8 minutes now. I'm dead. I'm dead weight. I don't know how they did it. They pulled me up, threw me over the side, I was sliding on the ice in the ferry. I didn't know what's going on now. Now they're yelling, get up, get up, get up. So I got to the side of the ferry, I'm like, shh, made it. But I didn't. Because that's the moment. And if you talk to the firemen, you talk to police, I do a lot of military, I do all these guys a lot. And I'll tell you this. These guys run into fire, right? They'll run into it. But when they're done, their adrenaline's gone. They have nothing left. They have nothing left. That's what happened to me. I had nothing left. I was so cold. I've ever been in 36-degree water for 7 or 8 minutes. I'm telling you, I was so cold. I didn't know what to think. But once again, it's amazing where people are in times of a crisis. There was a guy on this ferry. He had a gray suit on. He had his laptop over his back, and most importantly, he was dry. What did he have? He had an iPhone. He walked up to me and said, call your wife, call your wife. He put it right in my face. And I couldn't dial it, but I could get the number out. And you have to listen really close because I don't have a microphone. If you listen really close, you're going to hear what was happening on the ferry that day. If iOS 9 is working right now. You got to listen real close because we don't have a microphone. That's all I could get out. This is your dad, I've been in a plane crash. Now, my wife wasn't home waiting for me to give her a blow-by-blow of my day. She actually has a life. She's actually taking out son to basketball practice. So my daughter, who then was a junior in high school, finally did something we asked her to do. Don't answer the phone if you don't recognize the number. So she didn't. So fortunately for me, it went to our voice recorder at home. She heard the message, turned on the TV, and saw this breaking loose. That's how my family found out that I'm in a plane crash. That's all I could get out. Anybody here not been in New York or New Jersey? Anybody? A couple people? This picture is great because it tells you exactly where it all happened. So if you look at this picture really close, you see the Empire State Building in the back. Left of that, the big buildings are Manhattan. So that's New York. The other side of the river is Jersey. And 3 years ago, I had the privilege and honor to speak with a gentleman who wrote the plan for maritime rescues of the Hudson down in New Orleans. We spoke together at a conference. Very cool. See, this plan was written years ago. They just got a chance to practice it, right? So he and I spoke together. Plan, execution talk. Very cool talk, 2 hours, right? Plan, execution. And I learned a lot of things. But one thing I learned was pretty basic. Wherever closest point to shore you were is where you're going to go. So the left side of the plane is facing towards Manhattan. The right side of the plane is facing towards Hoboken. I'm heading to Jersey. And I found out later they radioed ahead because they knew I've been in the water. So when we hit shore, there were 3 people waiting just for me. There were 2 EMTs. They got from the Red Cross with a blanket. And that's why I speak all over the country and now all over North America for the American Red Cross. The little known fact about that day, which you will not hear in the media, is this. There were a lot of groups touching a lot of people that day. But there were 2 groups touched every one of us. The ferries, the waterways, and the Red Cross, both New York and New Jersey side. I couldn't walk. So they picked me up and carried me to a triage center. And as you know, there's nothing special about a triage center. It's a room with nothing in it. So they put me next to the wall, stripped all my clothes off down to my skivvies, and Heather, my EMT, says, I'll be right back. So I'm on the floor of my underwear. I don't even know what's going on now. I look over here. This guy's sort of like I am. I look over here, and this girl didn't have any underwear on, but it's amazing. You're on the floor naked. Everybody's looking. No one's talking. It's like, whoa, I'm naked with 2 people on the floor. What's going on now, right? Just in the water. All of a sudden I look up and there's this guy walking towards me. He had a card in his hand. He came up and said, "Sir, I need your name, I need your date of birth." He wrote on the card. He took my right ankle and he walked away. Now, I don't know when y'all grew up. I grew up in the 70s. There's a TV show called MASH, and they take your toe, they're carting you out. It's game over. That's exactly what I thought. I'm like, I'm on the floor, I'm naked, I'm ice cold, I can't breathe, and I got a tag in my foot. I must be dead, right? It's like that movie Ghost, where you're in that middle section, right? You watch yourself die, right? It's true. You watch yourself die. It's like, and you're talking and talking, but no one's answering. It's a very weird feeling. It's a very weird feeling, because I didn't know, I thought I was dead. I thought I was dead. But all of a sudden, Heather comes back and says, "I got to take your blood pressure." I said, "Good, blood pressure. That's good now, right? One blood pressure down." Unfortunately, it was 190 over 120. And she goes, "We got to go stat." And I heard that one on TV. When they say stat, you're going someplace, right? You're going someplace fast. She goes, "We got to go stat. You got a heart attack or stroke. We got to go right now." And I'm thinking, I survived the plane crash. I got out of the water, and now I'm going to die of a heart attack or stroke? God just keeps throwing fastballs, right? Just keeps throwing fastballs. But over the last few years, what I've sort of put that together is maybe God was giving me a different message. Like, are you ready? I want to set you on a new pathway. Are you ready? But now we are in fast motion. They pick me up, put me on this gurney, and wheel me out. And all of a sudden, you got sort of vision. There's a glass door to this place. And we hit the doors, I'm like looking out, it's like there's people everywhere. You got to remember, this is New York, rush hour, plane crash. There's media every place. And they're trying to get me to the ambulance. And this guy from NBC with his camera had his story. Last passenger out. So he started following us, right? They're trying to get me into the ambulance. He's jumping in the ambulance. There's chaos in the ambulance, right? They're getting him out, people pushing in, and all of a sudden they get it closed. The next slide. Take me to Palisades Medical Center. And once again, people in New Jersey get a bad rap because there's like 20 or 30 people waiting for me. And what happened was, I found out later, is the gurney got stuck in the ambulance. These are the nurses, right there, who jumped out, got blankets, picked me up, and carried me. Next slide, please. This bed right here. And this, I'm going to sidetrack it. This picture never should have been taken. Someone put their camera into the curtain, starts snapping pictures. I tell kids that's how fast this thing goes around. She gets me on the bed. There was a doctor. His name was Dr. Alban. He was there. He starts giving orders. And all of a sudden, these nurses all around me, right? And they're like feeling my legs. I couldn't feel anything. They were just doing stuff. And all of a sudden, he's yelling out orders. And he goes, blood pressure. They take it again. 190 over 120. I knew that wasn't good because Heather said I could have heart attack or stroke. I knew that wasn't good. They said oxygen. They got out 75. I didn't know what that meant. I found out later, that's not good. They said temperature. He said orally is 96. He said anally. Also, I got that one right. I know it's coming my way, whether I like it or not. It's coming my way. And if you go back one slide real quick. And my nurse Bautista, if you go back one slide, this is Nurse Bautista right here. She stayed with me the whole night. You go back down to the other slide. She stayed on my right arm. And she screams at the doctor. I can't get him off. I can't get him off. Because when I found out what happened, my body was so cold and so wet, basically my underwear was sticking to my hips. She was pulling and pulling. I still got scars on my hips today. She couldn't get these things off. So what do y'all always have? Scissors like this long, right? And she reaches out and goes, clip, clip, rip. That fast. And I'm down to my watch. All I got left is my watch. Because my temperature was 94. And that's when they diagnosed me with hypothermia. It took them 5 hours to warm me up. All night long, the nurses were there, just sort of feeling my legs and started beating my body and stuff like that. It was a really amazing experience. These nurses stayed with me, but Nurse Bautista stayed with me the entire night. But all night long, I kept just sort of not knowing what was going on because there's media every place. But that night, the governor of New Jersey, former governor, now you know wrong with governor, he's the former governor of New Jersey, the head of Port Authority, New York State Police, New Jersey State Police, Homeland Security, FBI. They all came to see me, and the guy was on my left. He was the first passenger out. He was in 1C. He jumped out, fell flat on the water, and fractured his sternum. And the reason they wanted to talk to us is this. Let's again, a little known fact that you will not get in the media. This is bonus information. Have 150 passengers, not counting crew, passengers. 10 of us went to the hospital. 7 went to New York City Hospital, like Columbia and Beth Israel, those hospitals. 3 of us went to Palisades over in Jersey. Out of those 10 people, 2 people stayed the night, Barry and I. 148 people walked home just a couple hours after a plane crash in ice cold water. And that's how this got named the Miracle on the Hudson. So if you go back to that night, if you go back and watch the footage, the governor of New York didn't say anything until like 8 o'clock, because what happened was everybody's already going home. They couldn't find people. They couldn't make an announcement until they could find everybody, what everybody was doing. But the authorities know where we were, and they had questions. And one of the questions I got was, do you think this is a terrorist attack? Because if you have a plane going towards a bridge towards Manhattan, someone's got to answer questions. And everybody else has already gone home. And so Barry and I were getting these questions all night long. But I kept telling the doctor, I had no clothes. I had no clothes. And the doctor kept saying, well, why do you need clothes? You're in a hospital, right? I said, I never stayed the night in a hospital. He said, why do you need clothes? You're in a hospital. But what he didn't know was this. Not only did all the authorities know where we were at, but all the media knew where we were at. And we agreed to do Good Morning America, the early show on Fox and Friends, and I had nothing to wear but my watch. That's all I had. Somebody from the Northern New Jersey chapter of the Red Cross got some really ugly sweats for me to wear the next day. And if you go to my website, you can see the video. Well, that told me something. Someone didn't know me from Adam. Goes out in the middle of the night and gets me something to wear. And you'll appreciate this. When you have nothing, I'm talking about nothing, you just get something, it's a big deal. Everybody okay? It's a big deal. Now, when something like this happens, and all the airlines have them, they have their own emergency response teams. U.S. Airways had one. Each one of us got our own, basically our liaison, our own person. And mine was Doreen from Pittsburgh. She flew in overnight, and Doreen had one job. Anything that I wanted, right? Take care of me. That's all she had. That was her job, to take care of me. So all night long, I finally talked to my wife that night, right? She was trying to get some underwear and stuff for me, some detailed stuff you don't even think about, right? So all night long we're doing all this. I was up all night, and what happened at the hospital is this. They put us on a separate like ward, so a separate area. And they tried to lock it down with security, but they didn't. So media was coming up all night long in the back hallways and stuff, trying to get in our rooms. So they put like 10 nurses out there just to make sure that no one could get to Barry and I. I mean, it's one thing if you talk to the U.S. Airways, I won't digress, talk to U.S. Airways, one thing they would talk about how they would improve the situation is that. Because they weren't ready for this. They were not ready for, they were ready to handle the situation, they weren't ready for the media. So they had to try to get the security up there, the nurses were trying to do it, the nurses were trying to take care of us. It was a little chaotic, But the next morning I go down and do these shows with Barry, do all these shows, right? I come back, and I'm feeling pretty good now. I'm warmed up, let's go, right? And all of a sudden, Doreen looks at me and says, listen, I don't want any more stress on you. I'm going to put you on the 5 o'clock or 12 o'clock flight home. I said, no, I'm going now. She said, you don't understand, I can't get you. I said, no, you don't understand. My wife and family at the airport, my kids are probably freaking out. I want to go home now. She said, no, you don't understand. She said, you are in Weehawken, New Jersey. You're going to go out to LaGuardia. It's almost 9 o'clock. The plane leaves at 10. I can't get you there. So I told you the night before, everybody wanted to be my friend. And they all left their cars and call me if you need anything. And I cashed in. And I'm going to tell you right now who the most important person in New York City is. The Director of Port Authority. I gave his card to Doreen. I said, listen, call him. He said he'd help me. She's like, look at him. Call the director. I said, call him. He said he'd help me. She told me, I thought you were melting down. I thought you were losing a little bit. And Doreen's like, okay. So she goes out and calls the Director of Port Authority, the top dude. 6 minutes later, I have a police escort. They're taking me from Weehawken, New Jersey to LaGuardia in 16 minutes in a pimped out Escalade, me and my hoodie. I'll tell you, that is a miracle, right? Have you ever had a chance to take a police escort through Manhattan? Take it. Nothing like it. Very cool experience, right? Even Doreen's like, this is pretty cool. I think this is pretty cool, right? So we get to the airport. I did one quick interview. I just want to go home. Just want to go home, right? So I had nothing to check. So I had nothing to check. Let's go, right? Let's go. But all of us, including me, we all forgot one critical detail. I didn't have an ID. How am I going to get through New York security TSA without an ID? Homeland Security guy's card to TSA. I played it. I said, call him. They said, looked at me and said, why don't we call the Homeland Security Director of New Jersey? I said, call him. He knows who I am. So he called him, and I got the New York security without an ID. I'll tell you, that's a miracle, right? Try that over at the airport. They don't play that game, right? So now I have the entourage, and they all want to walk with me now, right? So we're all, about 20 of us are walking down to the gate, and all of a sudden there's commotion at the gate, and all of a sudden they just walk me right in, put me in first class. What I found out is the captain deboarded the plane. Because he wanted to talk to me. He had questions. See, who ever talks to a guy who survived a plane crash? They had never talked to anybody, so he had questions. But what he wasn't expecting is this. I had questions for him. Are you going to get me over this bridge? Are you going to get me home, right? And he looked at me and told me, he said, sir, I do not have gliding experience. And that was the first time I heard, all these guys don't get this experience. He said, but I'll get you home safe. When we hit 3,300 feet, that's the first time I heard that. I know the plane only got 3,300 feet. I'll ring the bell so you and also know where it happened. So he put back in coach. I did not get first class, but I got free potato chips, free Cokes, free pretzels. Beth, the flight attendant, took great care of me, great care of me. They left the middle seat open, so I put my hoodie up like the Unabomber, and I locked it down. I'm not looking at anybody around. It's like, all right, get me out of here, right? So I hear ding, ding, ding. I start looking out the window. I'm like, man, 3,300 feet's not that high up. All of a sudden, this whole thing started coming back to me. That's when I started realizing not only what Captain Sullenberger did was amazing. The guy's a stud. What Jeff Skiles did, the first officer. You know, I got a chance to talk to him, with him in Chattanooga. We did a front of the plane, back of the plane talk. Very cool talk. And I got to learn a lot of things from him. One of the things I've heard from him is this. The first officer has a book up there. How do you get down from an emergency from 30,000-foot book? And he did it from 3,000 feet. So he was telling Sullenberger step by step what to do. He's as much a hero as Captain Sullenberger. But you never hear about the second guy in command, right? Never hear about him. He's as much a hero as Captain Sullenberger. So we get back to Charlotte, right? I told Beth the flight attendant, just take me off the plane last. Because everybody wanted to talk to me. I said, just get me out of here, right? So she takes me off the plane last, and my family was there, and U.S. Airways was there to do all the greet stuff. The CEO of the American Red Cross was there with my family. And that was the most important thing that happened the entire 2 days. Because I've had the honor and privilege over the last year, a few years ago, to Fort Hood after that. I've been to Oklahoma after the tornadoes. I went to Superstorm Sandy on the Eastern Shore of North Carolina. And what I found out is this. I get to talk to people. Is it people like me get taken care of? But a lot of times the families are forgotten. She was taking care of my family. That's why I have such a passion for the Red Cross. But that's where my miracle turns into my mission. And I want to end up taking, how does a miracle turn into somebody's mission? Back in the early 90s, I was a young salesman. And I was pretty self-confident in myself. My wife would have probably used a different term. And I know the term she would have used, cocky. But I thought I was pretty self-confident. I was doing pretty well. But I did one thing back then, was one of the smartest things I ever did. But you know what? I didn't know it was smart until years later. Right? It's one of those things you learn. It's like, wow, that's pretty smart. I found that mentor. That person in your life who can give you their 50, 60 years of experience, and all of a sudden you can use that experience right now to get advanced in your career. His name was Bill. And Bill wore a flannel shirt and drove a pickup truck. I didn't know who Bill was for a couple of weeks until I found out Bill owned 80 movie theaters in North and South Carolina. With $1 million. He's like the Bill Walton of Charlotte. This guy had money coming out of money. But I went to Bill, I called Bill one day and said, Bill, I want to be a business leader. And he gave me a life lesson. He said, if you want to be anything in life, put yourself around the peer group you want to be, and they will elevate you to that. So, okay, how can I fast track this thing? Right? I'm young. Fast track, let's get it going. I go to a business seminar with business leaders. That way I'm with them. I paid $4,000. My wife thought I was an idiot. We had a child on her way. She said, this is the stupidest thing I ever heard, right? But I go to San Diego, California. And part of the business seminar was to go do this thing called a mission statement. Now, I didn't know what a mission statement was back in 1993, 94. But you know what? I paid $4,000. I'm all in. I'm going to do it, right? So we get to this point, October 4th, 1994. I still have it written down. And I wrote this: I, Dave Sanderson, see, hear, feel, and know the purpose of my life is to be happy. Realize I can accomplish anything I desire and have faith in my Creator, inspiring others to be the same. I put it down. And he said, do not look at it for 6 to 9 months. Just start changing it, just sort of immersing it in all this stuff. Listen, I'm all in. I paid $4,000. I'm doing exactly what this guy says, right? So I look at it 6 to 9 months later. I'm like, man, I'm a loser. I'm not doing any of this. I can't tell my wife, right? Well, all of a sudden, January 15, 2009 comes, and that mission is then realized. Sunday after the plane crash, I went to my church in Charlotte. I'm a Methodist. You hear a Methodist? I went to the church. Everybody wanted to talk to me. But there was one guy who really wanted to talk to me. He had a men's breakfast. And he came up to me and said, Dave, will you speak at men's breakfast next Sunday? I said, no problem, man. 50 old guys eating pancakes? Got it. Walk in the park, right? No big deal. I knew they advertised over Charlotte. 500, 600 people show up. They move it to the gym, and most importantly, they run out of pancakes. They have a hungry, angry Methodist. And that's not a good combination for anybody. If I've been around for the Baptists, Episcopalians, Catholics, you do not run out of food in Methodist places. Methodists will tell you that. You've got to have food. So now I'm sort of freaking out a little bit. So you got to envision this. They put it in the gym, and our gym's like a gym with a sort of a stage at the end kind of thing, with a curtain thing. Okay, that's how. So I go behind the curtain and said, God, give me something to say, man. Give it to me now, right? Deliver. Give it to me. And he gave me something to say that day. 500, 600 people show up. So I'm standing, sort of, you got a vision of the gym now, right? Into the gym, talking out. I get done. A couple guys want to talk to me. One's from Bank of America, and one's from Wachovia. They had other people on the plane with me. I'm cool, that's cool. All of a sudden I look up, look in the back of the room, and there's this lady locking eyes with me. 80, 90 years old at least. And all of a sudden she starts making her way up. This thing like parts like the Red Sea, so she has a straight aisle to me. And all of a sudden she comes up, interrupts this conversation, and grabs my arm really tight. I'm jumping, whoa, what's this old lady gonna do to me, right? Because you remember, this is a week after a plane crash. And I was bruised all the way around. I was bruised. So when anything, you touched me, it hurt. Plus I had any sleep. So I'm like looking at her like, what's she gonna do to me? But she looked me in the eye and says something that only changed that day for me. Changed the entire direction where I was gonna go. She looked at me and said, I was questioning if there is a God. And I don't believe in miracles. But you're physical evidence that there is a God. You next slide, please. And he does miracles. Thank you. Thank you. She looked at me one more time, let my arm go, sort of looked and walked away. I look over these two guys. I've never seen two men cry like this. I mean, these guys are crying. My minister was in the back, so I started looking like, what's going on, right? But a few seconds later, it came to me. What happened to me on January 15, 2009, now impacted somebody. Because before she goes to her great beyond, wherever that may be, believes there is a God who does miracles, because I am physical evidence. So when Libby Ann asked me to be here several months ago, there was no doubt that I was going to be in Columbia, South Carolina today. There's no doubt. So I don't know who I'm going to impact. You go back to 2009, there wasn't a lot of positive things happening in this country. But all of a sudden, you have a captain, crew, and passengers that did something that never had ever been done in the history of aviation. One team, one goal, one miracle. And gave people hope. And there's a passage in the Bible that says suffering produces endurance, endurance produces character, character produces hope. And hope does not disappoint us. That's not only what happened that day, that's what I get to do every single day, and that's what you get to do every single day. You give people hope. And that's why I feel so passionate about nurses. I speak all over the country at the hospital. I love doing this. This is one of my favorite environments. A lot better than bishops and priests, I'm telling you that right now. Because you give people hope. And that's why I'm honored to be here today. There's a lot more I could tell you, but I want to leave some time for some questions and answers. Hopefully you have some questions and answers.